So you're getting ready to install one of these into your Dodge truck 04.5 through 18. There's a few blanks in this manual that I'm going to kind of help you fill in on, and a few tips and tricks that I found on my way to getting this completed. So this one is 07 Mega Cab, the last of the 5.9s. The fuel module is mounted right there up on the frame, as high as it's going to go so that it doesn't hang down. With it being four-wheel drive, we all know what ends up being splashed in here. So there's where I mounted it. One of the things that they fail to explain in the manual, or I sure the hell didn't see it when I looked at it 6 times, was what to do with the feed line. So there we go. So I bought a new fuel pump. When I pulled my fuel pump out, my basket was toast and the one feed line ear looked a little cracked. So I just went ahead and bought a new fuel pump, ditched the fuel pumps, and that way I've got a new sending unit. I figured the fuel pump's gone, the sending unit's probably not far behind. So what I did was I used some black RTV and basically glued on the feed line cap on the bucket. That is not described in the manual that I could find anywhere. You could probably use a vacuum line too, a vacuum line cap, and I would again RTV it on there so it doesn't, when the tank builds pressure, accidentally pop off. So I've left the fuel feed line in there, and that way if in future owners, whatever it needs to be used, it's available. I did not remove it from the vehicle. With this truck, I highly recommend, if you have the resources, take the bed off, put the whole thing in your face. It's just a million times easier if you have the resources or manpower to do so versus dropping the tank. The suck part, especially on this one about dropping the tank, was that this line goes out and then it goes around the frame back there. So it actually hooks down and around. You got to be really careful so you don't rip it up or destroy your fuel tube. Up front, again, what I did was I disconnected the feed line and zip tied it to the return line. I found that when my truck's lifted, so there is a little bit more space in here, but I found getting to the back of the filter / water separator housing was much easier back here. Now Dodge had a support bracket on that fuel line, and you'll see it when you take yours off. You might want to consider looking at either manufacturing one to help support it, or in this case I came down, made sure there was a lot of pressure up. Not a lot, but it's not pulling down on that connector. It's plastic. God knows how long it's going to last. Now that 90-degree press fitting, trying to get the hose in there, that was not a lot of fun. That was the hardest one. I found that the motor oil was not sufficient to do this. I actually used some dielectric grease to get all of the fittings on. And I also found that by putting them between your legs and using your knees to kind of squeeze as you're holding both ends, they slide on as you twist pretty easily. And I'm not weak, so they do take some doing to do. So that kind of covers some of that. But the other part that they really leave you hanging at, they give you a cool connector and a waterproof connector for at the pump, and shielded, split loop tubed power and ground to run up here to an ignition source. And tap into an ignition source is about what the instructions say. So on the newer Dodges, there's no real ignition source up here. And that fuse box is the totally integrated power module, TIPM, whatever they want to call it. There is no spade here for an ignition source. Every spade that's here is constant 12 volts. The fuel pump is fused at 25 amps from AirDog, and nothing here sufficed for that 25 amp requirement. A lot of fear in putting something that heavy of a load, piggyback fused, because they make piggyback fuses for these things, onto this on a lower rated circuit. It just smelled like trouble to me, and so I passed on it. My suggestion to you is going to be, what I did was, I just came up here with the wires. Once everything was done, had the fuel back, it had fuel in the tank, came up here with the power and ground, and I just held them on the battery. And I held them here for about 3 to 4 minutes. That way I was 100% sure that I had fuel all the way up here, and it was properly primed. I heard the pump change, but I kept running it for a while because I wanted not to have to bleed injectors, etc., etc., etc. So once I did that, then what I did, and this to me made more sense, I'm not sure why the instructions don't explain this. I came back here to where I mounted it, and that wire harness right there is the factory harness that goes back to the tank. The fuel pump feed for the factory fuel pump is orange with a red stripe, and you can verify it with your truck. It may change with model years, etc. The 07 was orange with a red stripe. So I tapped into it right there, soldered it, and protected the connection, and then came down and just ground it to the frame. So, thought being, A, the shorter the run, the better off I am. B, finding an ignition source in this truck didn't sound like a lot of fun. C, if I get in an accident and there's no preventative shut-off of fuel, and that rips open a line, I'm going to be puking fuel all over an accident site. So my thought process was, let's use the factory fuel pump. It's TIPM controlled. You can still, once this has been primed, you can still prime your filter when you replace it the same exact way you did from the factory. Key on, 5-6 times, whatever it is, and prime the filter. This seemed like the most prudent way and the safest way without spending hours up there trying to find an ignition source and making an unsafe installation. Other than that, it is really easy to do. It's, if you follow the instructions, feed it from up front, make that connection at the filter, come back here, cut the hose to fit. It's very nice and clean. I dropped the tank. Again, I would highly recommend lifting the bed if you have resources to do so, and made the connection with the tank. I laid it across the top of the tank. It is not over against all of this all the way up. It's on top of the tank and got a good loop, so anybody that's got to drop the tank in the future for whatever reasons, it's easy to do with plenty of slack. And then made the final connection here. So not horrible to do, but definitely those two issues, the electrical and what to do with the original feed line, are two items. Now, unless you blow out the fuel line, don't freak out the first time you take it for a drive. There's going to be fuel everywhere that spills out of that fuel line, so make sure you have plenty of brake parts cleaner available. You can still see I didn't get it all out of there. I thought for sure I had a really bad fuel leak some damn place when I went to put fuel in it, but it's just the original feed line that still had fuel in it. So either blow it out or expect to have to use a lot of brake parts cleaner and get this done.